Welcome to Final Fantasy Weekly. I'm Drew Kreisman.
And I'm Ira Kreisman.
And on this episode, we continue the adventure, well, the story at least, of Final Fantasy Tactics. Very dramatic, very intense, very violent story, but also, quite frankly, a masterpiece. So, as we get more and more into it, I'm just remembering how good all of this is. When last we left our heroes, terrible things were happening. That doesn't really narrow it down. So, Delita, Hyral's sister Tietra, has been kidnapped from House Baelv. And one thing it's worth remembering that I'm not sure we laid out entirely clearly at the beginning, I think it's to some extent clear, but these kids are very young. Tietra is 15 years old. You know, Ramza and Delita are 17. Ramza's brothers, Dicedarg and Zalbog, are much older than he is, as they sort of have their run of the place. And so this attack on House Baelv and all of the nobility and what it stands for, and as we're learning more about maybe legitimately some of the shady things that they're doing, has resulted in this 15-year-old girl who's just a steward of the place. She's just there with her brother because they're friends with Ramza, and they were taken in as kids because Lord Father Barbaneth was a slightly more decent human being than most of the nobles who live in this world.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we've got this trope, this literary device of child heroes. Like, I'm thinking of Steven Universe or Harry Potter, right? Like, these people are children when they start out on these adventures, and these adventures are life or death. And so, I mean, it's fun. I like the idea of kids getting to go on adventures and do heroic things, but also, like, real life, that's traumatic. And War of the Lions here does not really shy away from some of the trauma that these very young people would be going through.
Right.
Also, I just want to point out that when you say much older, you're talking like mid to late 30s. As a guy who just turned 40 years old this past summer, I'm not sure I like that description.
Much older than a 15-year-old.
That's fair.
But I hear you. Hey, for Final Fantasy,
Right,
Dicedarg
exactly.
at 38 is an old man, right?
I wouldn't be wanting to go on an adventure with the way my back is.
Right. No, it's the same, man. Totally. But after Tietra is kidnapped, the brotherly duo of Ramza and Delita decide they've absolutely had it with this guy, Argoth, who they've kind of been adventuring around with, and, you know, his classism has just gone over the top. It's no longer a theoretical, philosophical argument we're having. It's, my sister got kidnapped and you don't care because she's low-born. Get out of my sight. And Ramza agrees. They go their separate ways, and so now it's just the two of them and a small group of the warriors who you've sort of recruited along the way. You know, a handful of troops that would be following Ramza and Delita at this point. Because remember, Ramza's just a squire. He's just he's not even a knight yet. But his name carries quite a bit of value. And so it's just the two of them and a small group of people, and they decide, we've got to go to where we believe they're holding Tietra at Fort Ziekden, and they head that direction. As oftentimes happens in a fantasy epic, some of the most interesting things take place on the road, on the journey to the next destination. And on the way to Fort Ziekden, one night at sunset, friends Ramza and Delita stop to watch the sunset. And whether you're playing the original version of the game or you get the War of the Lions version, which makes this into a beautiful hand-drawn cinematic, is a really beautiful scene between these two friends. It's one that I think you and I have always remembered as one of those ones that lives in the Final Fantasy tradition of the promise in Final Fantasy VII Under the Stars between Cloud and Tifa at the well, or any number of other moments like that are these small, kind of quiet, little moments between two people that are just so much more enormous in the grand scheme of things when you think about it thematically. But this doesn't move the plot forward, does it?
Not really, no. What it does is it develops the characters. It cements their connection, sort of, in a way.
Yeah.
And I often feel like, well, we've talked about this in other episodes for Final Fantasy and Studio Ghibli and even the DC movies. Sometimes the quiet moments are some of the best, because if it's all go, go, go action all the time, there's no chance to sit and breathe, no chance to collect oneself, no chance to understand why any of this might matter. Like what this does is it helps us understand why it matters.
Yeah. And so Delita, who in this story so far has been primarily more concerned about the personal and how his sister is doing at school and generally getting along with Ramza and all of that, it hasn't been delving into the political machinations as much. Hasn't been quite as introspective as some of these other characters. But he says here, "It's beautiful, isn't it? At the sunset," he says to Ramza, "do you think Tietra might be watching this same sunset?"
That's the American tale.
Yeah, somewhere out there.
Yeah.
Ramza says, "Don't worry, Delita. I'm sure she is well." Okay, I don't know how you know that, but the things friends say to comfort each other. And then Delita says that something's been bothering him, and Ramza says it, is Argoth, right? All that stuff with Argoth. Delita says, "There are things beyond the power of our changing, Ramza. Try though we might." And Ramza says something, again, trying to comfort his friend, so hopeful, and yet even for someone like me who preaches constantly against cynicism, this is so naive.
Yeah.
Ramza begins, in fact, he doesn't even get to finish his thought. He says, "Do not say that. If a thing can be endeavored, it..." And Delita cuts him off and gives one of my favorite tiny little speeches. He doesn't give like a whole Meluda speech. That's not his style. Delita says, "Will endeavor grant me an army? I would save Tietra with these hands if aught were in my power to do. But I cannot. 'Tis my meager lot in this life."
Yeah. I mean, that's fascinating for so many reasons. I mean, on the one hand, yeah, what can you and I do against, whatever negative political policies we might see in the world, right? If Russia really does invade Ukraine, nothing you and I can do about it. At the same time, turns out there's a lot Delita can do. And maybe I'll leave it at that, but there's a lot he can do.
Right. This whole conversation in hindsight, this idea that what he needs is an army, and maybe that's not what he needs, but that's a traditional way of thinking about how you gain power and how you free your sister. And so, going through all of this, we'll just have to come back to it. We'll come back to this conversation later. How about that? And then, I guess in recognition that thought or that particular problem might be a bit too large for the moment, Delita gets, again, back to the personal introspection. He sees a flower kind of nearby, and he says, "Do you remember, Ramza?" He picks up a blade of grass. He says, "When your father showed us how to make a whistle of a blade of grass." And then he starts blowing on it, and it made this kind of silly sound back on the PlayStation 1, and Ramza picks one up and continues, and the friends blow on blades of grass to make a whistle sound as they look out over the sunset.
Yeah, it's a beautiful scene, and that's a thing people can do, I guess. Like, you can use a sufficiently broad blade of grass, like a reed in a woodwind, to make a sound like that. It's such a simple thing to do. Is that a thing lords are taught? Is that something Lord Barbeneth Beale learned out in his time as a soldier? Did he pick that up from a commoner, maybe? I mean, or maybe I've got that backward. Maybe it is a thing that lords learn, though it seems kind of the earth to me. Like I said, it cements their relationship. These guys like each other. They're friends. They're brothers. And for all that's about to happen, I think it is important that they are looking at events bigger than themselves and trying to see what they do without losing sight of how do we help each other. And for all that Ramza was not quite a classist asshole earlier, he is gaining some perspective though, right? He lacked some of that perspective. He didn't understand his own privilege.
Right.
To use a watchword of the last several years. And I think he's learning some things here.
Yeah. And so, despite the fact that we just talked about it in full detail, I do want to play the War of the Lions cutscene for everyone, and I want to make note of the voice work. Delita is voiced by an actor named Robin Atkin Downes. He's been in a lot of Final Fantasy stuff, including playing Luxord in Kingdom Hearts 2. He's been in Metal Gear Solid, Valkyria Chronicles, Assassin's Creed 3. Lots of voice work for him, though I didn't know him specifically. But Ira, when I looked up the voice actor for Ramza Beov, I almost fell down in disbelief. I had to Google it 3 times to be absolutely sure that this is true. Ramza Beov is voiced by Phil Lamar.
You're kidding me. Phil Lamar. No shit. That guy's done a lot of voice acting. Like when I think of all-time voice actors, he's right up there with like Rob Paulson.
Mm-hmm.
He's Mark Hamill for that matter. Mark Hamill's got a breadth of voice acting that I am sometimes surprised about. Phil Lamar did Ramza. That's super cool.
I was blown away by that. He's been in lots and lots of things, as you said, but
he's Jon Stewart Green Lantern in DC. God, he's done so many things.
He was on Mad TV back in the day. He's the UBS guy. He's randomly in a bunch of he's in Spider-Man 2, just on the train. He's there.
No shit. He was in that Quentin Tarantino one where he gets his head blown off accidentally in the car.
Spoilers.
Well, I mean,
it's
Quentin Tarantino. Someone's
movie.
liable to have their head blown off.
But yeah, I was like, oh, I know I want to play this scene and I want to mention who the voice actors are. I went, no.
That's super cool.
Because Ramza's voice is so light and filled with naivete, and Phil Lamar usually voices these very deep voiced characters. And
I most associate him with Jon Stewart.
Same. But yeah, here is the Blade of Grass scene from Final Fantasy Tactics: The War of the Lions.
It's beautiful, isn't it? Do you think Tietra might be watching this same sunset?
Don't worry, Delita. I'm sure she is well.
Something's been bothering me, Ramza, for some time now.
Argoth's words trouble you. Am I not right?
There are things beyond the power of our changing, Ramza. Try though we might.
Do not say that. If a thing can be endeavored, it
will endeavor? Grant me an army? I would save Tietra with these hands, if aught were in my power to do. But I cannot. 'Tis my meager lot in this life. Do you remember, Ramza? When your father showed us how to make a whistle of a blade of grass.
So, as Ramza and Delita continue down the road trying to find Delita's sister Tietra, they are, of course, still in this proxy battle war with the Corpse Brigade that's constantly going on and they keep running into. And so they come once again upon this woman, Miluda, who we met before and dropped a whole bunch of truth and got real pissed when we didn't give her the honor of a clean death. So she is not happy to see us, is I think what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah. And I get it. I'm like, no good guys and bad guys in war, but yeah, she's not wrong.
So Miluda's troops are ready to give up, raise the white flag, surrender. She says, no. And she doesn't want to be hung. She doesn't want to be in chains. If I'm going out, I'm going out on the battlefield, right? And so they decide to fight with Delita and Ramza, who are much more interested in, where is Ygraf? What have you done with my sister? You know, which one of you Corpse Brigade people took my sister? Where is she? That's all I care about.
Right.
I don't care about any of the rest of this.
No. Whatever political machinations are going on here, we are more interested in the personal.
Yeah.
And that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Now, Miluda seems to only vaguely be aware of the situation. Says that Beowulf girl that Grogoroth took hostage?
Because the internal politics of the Corpse Brigade remains a mystery to us.
Right. So Delita, again, trying to cut through all of that, just goes right to the point, saying, Tietra is my sister, no more a Beowulf than you. Please, she's no value as a hostage. Return her, I beg you. I hate it every time he has to try to say that she has no value. Like him accepting their central conceit that because she's a commoner. But that's his argument. That's how he thinks to make the argument, you know? And then we get another Miluda speech where she drops a little truth on our would-be heroes. She says, as you nobles return what you take from us, our lives, our dignity, and all else that you have claimed as your own, we ask nothing more than that you return us to what is ours by right, but you deny us even that. You take and take until there is naught left. Save your high-born breath. Your words are wind, and no amount of howling will see your sister free. And Delita just says, but I'm not. And now this thing that has surely been a huge positive for his life for the most part, in, you know, keeping him and his sister out of the streets, or, you know, they presumably in many ways had much better lives because they were raised alongside the Beowulfs. But now he's caught between, but we're not. Oh, it's so heartbreaking. And Miluda's just so filled with hate at the nobles, she has no reason to believe him.
Right, and he would be, I mean, like you said, his and his sister's life would have been so much better because Daddy Beowulf took him in, right? And so that the nobles won't accept him, you know, the nobles like Argoth won't accept him, and peasants like Miluda won't accept him. He's outside of both worlds. And that's got to be exhausting.
Yeah. So you remember when we talked with our big questions at the very beginning about the personal, the family, and then the community, and Delita being primarily concerned about the personal, then Ramza takes us back to the political conversation at large here. And I believe, Ira, he asks these questions because he knows he's starting to awaken a little bit and get it. And he says to Miluda what he needs to. Why this struggle? To what purpose do you fight? Have we wronged you? What a naive question to ask, but he does. Have we wronged you? Have we somehow made you suffer? I do not understand what fuels your hatred.
Dude, get outside your own house, man.
Yeah. Now remember, Ramza's 15. He doesn't know anything other than what he's been taught by his brothers and his father and maybe a little bit his sister and mother, which is what makes him a little bit different.
And I got to say, I've met plenty of naive teenagers.
Sure.
with a lot of hubris.
Yeah.
Just, you know, none of them with swords and this much power politically, you know?
Yeah. And Miluda gives, spoilers, her final beautiful speech, her final middle finger to the aristocracy. The thing that I think really does it for Ramza. There's an event coming up that's going to force everyone's hands. But inside his brain, the cogs were already spinning. She says, "It is enough that you can stand there before me in ignorance of the misdeeds done us. You may not see the world beyond your high walls, but that does not mean they mark its boundaries. It may well be you've done no wrong. It is your place in the world that drives my hatred on. You bear the name Beowulf, and that name is my enemy."
Yeah. Again, I there's this meme going around TikTok. I'm a 40-year-old TikTok person. Put that out there first.
Yeah,
there's this meme going around TikTok that I don't disagree with. I feel like it's kind of Meluta's position, but I also don't really like it. So the meme goes, violence is not the answer. Violence doesn't solve anything. And then the same person turns around and says, if you break a Nazi's arm, they have 50% fewer arms to do Nazi shit with. So on the one hand, I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to hurt anybody. But when the aristocracy is doing Nazi shit, you have to at least stand up to it. You can't just let it happen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not going to break anybody's arm. But, I'm going to make my voice heard.
Is.
Yeah, well, Delita's going to do quite a bit.
So, yeah, I love that. By the way, I'm gonna remember that one. I'm not on TikTok, so that's kind of funny, but yeah.
You kids not being on TikTok.
So, because we were just on opposite sides of the conflict or whatever, and we're in battle, and because Ramza just isn't getting it yet, they have to fight Meluda to the death, and this time they do.
She's not going to give them the choice to not fight her to the death.
Right.
Like, not a chance.
Yeah. Right. This is just going to happen, but then it does. And her final words, she asks forgiveness from her brother, and she dies. And Ramza clearly has had it, and he says, Why must it end like this? And Delita says, what am I doing? What have I become?
Yeah.
We're definitely the baddies.
We're definitely the bad guys here, yeah. So
now we get a scene transition, and we start to see a little bit more of what we were talking about earlier, the interpolitics of the Corpse Brigade. And we see Wygraf, who we've already been introduced to as certainly a more noble rebel than his previous friend Gustav, who he had to kill for doing things inartfully.
Sure, yeah.
Kidnapping in a really stupid way, which we're going to learn more and more about. But here's another kidnapping, and he's given it to this Groggoroth guy, saying, why did you kidnap this girl?
We just had this problem, you idiot. Quit kidnapping people. That's not what we're here for.
Groggoroth is pleading his case. There was no other way to escape. We had to take a prisoner. We had to get out of there. He's like, well, then why didn't you let her go after that? But then their interpolitics sort of obfuscate the issue. And he says, look, she's a Beowulf. 100 swords, 1,000 could not buy our freedom with such ease. And he's like, so we're going to use her to run away? What are you talking about? And Wygraf, ever the idealist, remembers that the goal for him has always been to stick it to the aristocracy, not for them to just be able to survive. And Groggoroth says, so I guess you're just ordering us to our deaths then? And Wygraf responds, if by our deaths a single drop of noble blood should water the earth, they shall not be in vain.
Yeah, for Wygraf, it's not necessarily about him. He's not making the world better for him. They're the Corpse Brigade. They're dead already. They know that, right? Like, he gets it. It's not about... He never expected to get through this alive.
Right.
What he expected to do was make his voice heard by whatever method he had to.
Yeah. So at this point, a messenger arrives and informs Wygraf that his sister, Miluda, has been killed. He takes it really, really well.
Right. Very even-keeled here.
And, so they decide to regroup back at Fort Ziekden, which is where our heroes were headed anyway. Our party arrive and attack. So Grogoroth takes Tietra and leaves as our party is set to face off once again against Wygraf and his retinue of soldiers. Of course, he's very upset because we just killed his sister. And he's also upset that we're not even proper knights. It's like, oh, well,
right.
Sorry about that. Ramza apologizes, for killing his sister. And, he's clearly having a crisis of confidence and existence and everything right now. But obviously there's no getting behind or getting around the rage that Wygraf has here. And so it's a little bit tough. Even Delita saying, hey, what about my sister? Set her free. It's like Wygraf's not really in the mood for, your sister, my sister situation.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, man, this is what you were talking about last episode. You kill my uncle, so I kill your brother. And you kill my cousin, so I kidnap your princess or whatever. And it's just like, Wygraf's not going to hear any of it.
I like that Ramza jumps in. He tries to defend Delita also by using that same logic, right? Like, he's not a noble. He's not a Beowulf. I am. Be pissed at me.
Yeah.
And Wygraf's like, what does it matter? I don't care who. And Ramza says, so you would draw no distinction between our house and those who deal with us. And Wygraf says, should I? It matters not. There was no question as to her release. We do not make a habit of holding hostages, but first we've a score to settle. Because you killed my sister, you piece of shit.
Yeah. And then, as we've talked about before, while they're battling, they're often always talking to each other. It's kind of like they're constant siege battles, I guess. They take a long time, so there's plenty of room to be having conversation across the way. And, the battle over, why'd you kill my sister? What happened here? Turns into, again, Ramza tries to get it back to the politics, but here's where we get the larger problem of, as kind-hearted as Ramza may be, maybe, what does it really truly matter? So Ramza's going through all this. People shouldn't be dying. Let us treat instead and persist not in this bloodshed. And Wygraf almost laughs in his face. Says, what advantage might I hope to enjoy at the treaty table? And who would set a seat for me there? You? Even if it were in your power, your brothers would never heed any agreement we might reach. And Ramza shows his naivete once again and says, my brothers do not want this fight.
Ha.
Ha.
Let me tell you what, Ramza.
Yeah. And then, do you know what Wygraf says, Ira?
I have an inkling, but I would like for you to say it.
He says, no spoony bard could spin a sweeter tale.
Nice.
How in this world of such seriousness and such extraordinarily tight and clever writing did they manage to throw in a spoony bard reference?
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. I love it.
And again, in a moment of anger, he's not making a joke. He's not saying a silly thing. Yeah. Oh, what a way to call somebody naive. What a trash talk sentence this is. He says, you say your brothers do not want this fight? Tears then, for the world you see is one beyond my weary sight. Child.
Yeah.
I added the...
Yeah.
And, Ramza continues to press, you believe that my brothers plotted war? And Wygraf says, callow child. Oh, there's the child.
There it is. Because he is. They are children. They are literally children. And they're being shoved into this situation that they should never, ever have had to deal with. And I guess that it's a harsher world, that kids have to grow up faster. But still, God, what a mess. Not of their own making.
And so Wygraf says, the hands that guide history's reins are ever black with blood. Think you Dicedarg's hands more just? A new justice is born and dies on the lips of each man who would pronounce it. Ramza takes offense, says, "Do not mock my brothers," and we end up besting Wygraf in battle, and he actually decides that he is going to escape. But before he does...
Ooh, this is... Here it comes, man.
He drops a bomb on Ramza and says, "Who do you think sent Gustav to kidnap the Marquis Elmdor? It was none other than your lord brother Dicedarg, with Lord Zalbog's approval, to be sure."
Why? Why?
Ramza, why would Dicedarg
would he
do such
do
a
that?
thing? Why? And here Wygraf explains the war to come that he sees before anybody else sees it, that he understands that even in his tiny rebellion to stick it to all of them, he sees the pieces on the chessboard being laid out. He says, "The lions vie for power in the void left by the king's death. I speak, of course, of Larg, the white lion, and Goltana, the black. Each hopes to learn who may be counted as friend and who as foe, but such things are not so easily read. Easier rid yourself of those whose loyalty is uncertain, and install others to rule in their stead. I fear Gustav, fool that he was, tired of our rebellion, and was taken in by the silver tongue of your dear brother, Dicedarg."
So the Larg who was sort of Dumbledoring us earlier about, well done on rescuing the Marquis Elmdor. That's the White Lion. Duke Larg, the White Lion.
Yeah.
Backed by the Order of the Northern Sky, who our heroes are part of. Versus Goltana the Black, backed by the Order of the Southern Sky. This is messed up. They plotted the kidnapping of Argos Marquis Elmdor so that Elmdor would be removed as being, a fence sitter. And then when Ramza jumps in and saves him, right? Well, now he's got to be on Duke Larg's side, because now you owe us a favor.
He owes us.
Our upstart squires, in all their nobility, saved your neck, Elmdor. You really going to turn against us now? But the king's not quite dead yet, so we got a little bit of time.
Right. But this is the big thing that's about to go down, right? And so after Wygraf escapes, Delita and Ramza are able to search the premises and discover that Tietra is not there, and Delita continues his spiral downward and does what I think any of us would do at this point and ask, why? Just why is this happening? Why Tietra? Why us? Like, we don't have anything to do with the White Lion or a Black Lion, and we're not even in House Beowulf. Like, what?
Yeah.
Why?
Which came from the kindness. I mean, they are Beowulf.
They are.
Because,
right.
Barbaneth Beowulf thought he was doing a good thing, and he was. That was an objectively good thing he did. And yet.
Yeah. And so, again, after more traveling, our party finally reaches Ziekden Fortress.
Oh, you know what? You know what would be good here, Drew? Why don't we just stop here? We will just assume that Ramza and Delita make up. That everything will be fine. They rescue the princess. The young ward of Beowulf Manor. Mm-hmm. And the War of the Lions is called off, and everything is fine.
They move on. They live their days happily out in the woods as farmers.
They turn the aristocracy into a republic.
Right.
Everybody gets a vote. Mm-hmm. Maybe even a House of Commons.
Ooh.
Right? How about that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, that is not what happens next, unfortunately.
Not even close.
The fortress at Ziekden is, well, exactly what it sounds like, a fortress, a military operation. Up on the mountains, we get the sense that we're in the highlands here. It's snowing heavily. The sky is dark gray and everything is cold, and you get the sense that this is maybe one of the furthest outposts of military presence in Ivalice. And as we arrive, it's going down. There's Grogoroth. He's got Tietra He's doing the stay back. If you get any closer, I'm going to kill her. And Zalbag and Argoth are already there with troops. So your first thought might be, the Order of the Northern Sky, with whom we've been fighting for this entire time, has already arrived.
They're here. Hey, you know what? Ramza's brothers kept their promise. How about that?
Zalbag said he'd come for her.
Yes.
But he does yell out the Order of the Northern Sky yields not before the braying of rogues. We don't negotiate with terrorists, essentially.
Sure, yeah. God, man, it's so like they've got him, right? They've got him. We're right here. We didn't have to go quite this far.
And so Ramza and Delita arrive on the scene. Ramza immediately shouts across, Lord Brother, and Argoth, and Delita, of course, Tietra. Concerned with the person who's actually in danger here. And Grogroth keeps shouting again, withdraw, withdraw. And Zalbag then says, this changes nothing, Argoth. Loose your attack. And Argoth says, yes, my lord, pulls out his crossbow and shoots Tietra right in the chest. She falls limp. And I think very clearly, almost immediately dies.
Yeah. And this is one of those, I mean, if they wanted to justify it, Zalbag could say, well, I didn't kill her. And Argoth could say, well, I was just following orders.
Yeah.
F them both.
Even Grogroth is in shock at what's just happened. He mutters, gods have mercy. And Argoth looses another crossbow bolt, hits Grogroth. And Tietra's final words, Delita, I'm sorry. Ay.
Yeah. So this is why I hate Argoth. This is also why I hate Ramza's brothers. Like, this is just unforgivable. Even if they had a huge redemption arc or whatever, I could never forgive them for this. This is awful. This is treating the lower classes like chattel. They're just there for us to kill as we see fit, to move as pawns on the chessboard. They need to get rid of the corpse brigade before the War of the Lion starts, right? And Tietra's just in the way.
Yeah,
she's just in the way,
That's right.
It's so gross.
It really, really is. And Zalbag, feeling nothing about it, leaves the rest in the hands of Argoth and just bounces.
And this girl grew up in his castle.
Yeah.
I mean, he should see her as a little sister at the very least.
Yeah.
Doesn't even care.
Doesn't care. Gave the order, leaves, because they're more concerned about just stamping out the corpse brigade and doing their other political things that we're going to learn more and more about and are starting to, from Wygraf of all people. They're the ones being honest, of course, the rebels,
Sure.
The corpse brigade here.
Yeah.
And, Argoth yells something obnoxious across the way at Delita about where are you going to go now? And Delita calls him a whoreson dog.
Yeah. Whatever the fuck I want, you piece of shit. You going to stop me? Ugh. You're going to have to get the...
I'm going to have to get the censor machine back out for this one. I'm going to be deleting stuff all over muting you. So Argoth begins the battle that's obviously going to ensue here by saying, I will show you that common blood makes naught but a common man. And Ramza, again, still kind of showing his naivete. He's asking for answers from Argoth, as though the guy hasn't made his life philosophy very clear to us up to this point.
Yeah, no kidding.
What the hell? Why did you do? What moved your hand? He asked him. And like you said, Argoth immediately hides. He says, your Lord Brother's orders, Ramza. What else? Would you have us kneel before them and offer up the Order's honor in exchange for the life of some common wench?
Oh, honor
Yes.
is more expensive
Yes.
than a life. Ugh.
Screw your effing honor.
Yeah.
Yes, one person's life matters more than the perceived honor in one single moment of whatever order of bullshit you... Yeah.
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 In case it wasn't clear whose side we personally are on.
Right. And, Argoth screams a bunch of more classist nonsense. The fight keeps going. He kind of reminds Ramza that what you're doing right now is technically treason. We've been fighting with the Order of the Northern Sky this entire time, and now we are very directly fighting against them.
And there's something to be said. So one of the game mechanics is that you get like 3 or 4 characters who are not characters in the story. They're just your troops. They can have whatever name, right?
Right.
They're whatever classes you make them. They don't play a storyline part. They're just some of your guys.
Right.
I always had like 2 or 3 of these units who, I've like I said, no storyline significance, but they meant something to me. So it feels to me like they're sort of the silent backup. They're not the silent protagonist, but sort of the silent backup. And it means something to me that they also were members of the Order of the Northern Sky. They were squires. They were cadets. And in this moment, they side with Ramza and Delita. They don't join the Northern Sky in this fight. They're still on our side. So even though none of them says, yeah, we're with you, Ramza, they just stand with Ramza. Like it's a game mechanic thing, but it still means something to me.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like that a lot. And I think you're right. Like the people, they fight for Ramza. Right? And so he says another very naive thing, thinking that the Order of the Northern Sky would never forgive what Argoth has done. He's like, dude, come on. Ramza, grow up. Delita interrupts them with another great, I am going to kill you line where he says, make your peace with the gods, Argoth. You die by my hand.
Say your prayers, rabbit.
Yeah. Ramza's still fighting about the nobility and saying my birth was not of my choosing, and Argoth keeps trying to give him speeches about how important it is that he understands the honor of House Beowulf and that it might reign on history's stage and all of this nonsense. The Beowulf name is our shield behind whose aegis we've long thrived. It is the way of things. People are used and use others in turn. How do you think you came to be where you are? There's an interesting question.
Yeah.
He says, you are loath to be used, yet you feign to use others, even your so-called friend, Delita.
Hey, now.
And Ram's like, oh, what do you mean by that? And he goes to check on Delita, who's been injured in the battle, and Delita says to him, speak not to me. When Argoth falls, my vengeance turns on you, Ramza.
No, but we had the moment with the grass.
No, I know. It's very, very, very angry now, and maybe there would have been a way to salvage this, but not under these circumstances.
No.
After a bit more back and forth, Delita says, I think, what becomes his new mantra. I'll not be told what I will do or when. Not by you, nor by any other. Delita, in my mind, with that statement, and clearly what is to come after, no longer has a house. His sister is gone, his only actual family is gone, and he feels betrayed by House Beowulf. He obviously doesn't care about the politics of... Totally. So he's just... That's it. I'm going to do what I think is best, and I don't care what anyone, including my friend Ramza, has to say. But they do have one last thing they have to do together. They have to kill this bastard.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I don't want to be breaking anybody's arms, but fucking Argoth.
This guy is okay. Yeah. And with his last words, as he is slain by Delita and Ramza, he cannot believe that it is at the hands of milksop rabble.
Even in death, he's a classist piece of shit.
I'm saying,
What
right?
a bootlicking tool, honestly. And like literally a tool, right? Like he just let Zalbag point him at Tietra and pull the trigger.
Yeah, and then left him to die.
Yeah.
Because he probably knew that his brother was a better warrior.
Yeah, that'll take care of that.
Yeah.
Ramza will take care of this.
In fact,
Yeah.
that was almost certainly Zalbag's plan, so he could be done with Argoth. Like, God. Oh.
So gross.
It's all so disgusting. And then we get, again, another cutscene if you've got the War of the Lions version. And this is intense.
Yeah.
So, Fort Ziekden has kind of these two main stone castle pillars and this high wooden bridge in between the two of them that connects them up at the top. And that's where Grogoroth and Tietra were standing when they were shot by Argoth. And so after the battle, when our scene picks back up, Delita is up on that bridge, and he is standing over his sister's body. And and Ramza approaches from the back and stands there, and Delita does not turn to see his old friend, I guess we got to call him now. Sort of kneels down and I don't know if he quite picks her up, but he just takes Tietra into his arms, basically. Not dissimilar from Cloud and Aerith in Final Fantasy VII, right? And Ramza keeps his distance. He's way far back there because he doesn't want to get all up in Delita's space, right? And he says the only thing I think anyone would know how to say in that moment, which is, "I'm sorry, Delita." And we did mention this earlier, but it's told at one point that this fort is housing a bunch of gunpowder and munitions, and like that's one of the things that it's there for, right?
Which is interesting because we haven't seen firearms yet.
Right.
It's like we're on the precipice of that, advent of war.
Sure.
Gods.
Like gunpowder's being invented or something here, right? And we start to see all this black smoke coming out of the window. Presumably the events of our battle with Argoth and the Order of the Northern Sky lit something effused.
Yeah.
And the fort starts to explode. And, Ramza says, "Hey, we got to get out of here. Let's go." But Delita doesn't move. He will not leave his sister's side. And essentially, in whatever version of it you're watching, there's just a bunch of explosions and fire goes up everywhere, and Ramza falls back in one direction and has to kind of pull himself out into the snow and looks up and everything's on fire. And presumably, we know Delita isn't dead because we've seen him in the future.
Right.
But presumably that was the conclusion that Ramza came to in that moment.
Yeah. Ramza did not know that Delita was going to be alive to kidnap the princess at the start of the game.
Yeah. And then we get one of my favorite pieces of writing so far, and I won't even read this one. I'll go back to the cutscene and finish out with Phil Lamar.
Thank you, Mr. Lamar. My goodness.
As Ramza Beelv, describing in one of the simplest and most beautiful ways I've ever heard what it feels like to slink away from a broken life.
I had lived my life the only way that I had known. But when the pillars of that life came crashing down, I did not stand and watch them fall. I turned and walked away.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and thank you to everyone who's reached out to us. Feel free to let us know what we missed, got wrong, or should have mentioned by finding us on Twitter at FFWeeklyPod. You can email FinalFantasyWeekly@gmail.com, but of course the easiest and best way to get a hold of us is on Patreon at patreon.com/FFWeekly. And for plenty of more video game content, including more Final Fantasy stuff, other video games, also comic books, DCEU, MCU, Star Wars, sometimes just random movies like The Death on the Nile, all kinds of entertainment fun podcasts we're doing over at patreon.com/DC Productions. Join us next time for Chapter 2 of Final Fantasy Tactics, The Manipulative and the Subservient.
Philmar. No way.
Dude, right? I was like, this has to be a mistake. I'm getting a second and third source for this.
That's wild.
He sounds like a 15-year-old British kid.
Gee whiz. You did. You blew my mind. I thought for sure when you said that earlier, I was like, nah, I totally knew that. Nope. Caught me off guard.